Someone in chambers has power.
Different vibration here. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the October 27th Ojai Disaster Council meeting. Call to order. May we have the roll call, please, Andrea?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Mayor Sticks,
Here.
Pro Tem Wyrick,
Here.
City Manager Vega,
Here.
Chief Rivera,
Here.
Chief Leakey,
Chief Leak. Oh,
did I say it wrong? I pronounced Todd, Chief.
Andrea, can you speak a little louder? We're having trouble hearing you.
Okay, good. Chief Leakey,
It's Todd Leak, yes, President.
Interim Public Works Director Quezada,
Here.
I can't hear. Mr. Roper,
Present.
Mr. Bob Daddy,
Here.
and Chief McNeil.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're all present
Thank
here.
you, Andrea. And Mr. Bob Daddy, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Would you join me in the pledge?
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bob. And approval of the agenda? Yay or nay?
And second.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to approval of the minutes. Yep.
Yeah. I'll move to approve those. They were lengthy because we have the detail and working through the fire action plan, but I think they were accurate, so I'll move to approve those.
I'll second that
Okay.
accuracy.
And I think today we were noting we're going to try to just do by consensus, so we'll do all opposed and any, or all in favor, all opposed. We
Okay.
won't go person by person.
Okay, all right. So
So,
all in favor?
aye.
Aye. Okay, wonderful. All right, moving on to public communications. Andrea, any public communications on this? No? Okay, James is shaking his head.
Yeah, there were no public comments, although I'll note, and that's why I was waiting. There was one person who was signing in, but I don't think they have raised their hand yet. So no public comments at this time. If they raise their hand, we'll go back to them.
Okay, excellent. All right, let's move on to number 5, discussion and action items. A, subject presentation by Bob Roper regarding risk maps. So thank you, Mr. Roper, for being here. Much appreciated.
Okay, well, thank you, and if we could bring up the PowerPoint. So as that comes up, let me just introduce why this came about. And it happened several years ago, talking to Mayor Johnny Johnson is about the topic of, everybody always asks the fire chief, he goes, well, what's fire season going to be like? How bad's it here or how bad's it there? Am I endangered or not? Okay. So the CAL FIRE creates these very high fire hazard severity maps. And in the maps, we'll be going over those. But what they do is they really just create a zone. It doesn't go parcel by parcel and so forth. And they're very, I'll call it, very static type of maps. So really to tell the people who live in the city, how can you best, are you really endangered or are there things that you could do? The premise now is to develop risk maps. Risk maps are dynamic in nature. They're designed to tell somebody these are some fixed factors that you're associated with your property, but there's other factors that you can do to change the risk that you go in. And in a perfect world, risk maps would be done so that if you do mitigation actions, then the insurance company and yourself would feel rewarded that your risk is lower, okay? Currently, Insurance companies give you a discount if you put in security alarms on your house. They give you a discount if you put fire sprinklers in your house. There, you're actually changing the risk that you're doing. So what we wanted to do is to look at, could this be done in the city? And the reason there is because last year in the state legislature, there was an assembly bill that was passed that actually implemented risk maps to be developed at the state level. That's being done by Cal OES and the Office of Planning and Research at this time, so that they were going to be doing exactly what we're talking about doing here, what you'll see here today at the state level. The only thing is, at the state level, being because of the large nature of the number of parcels and everything, it may take several years for all that work to be developed and bought in by all the different stakeholders in it. So the risk maps, like we said, the biggest thing that once these are done, then a community can be used for that for planning purposes, community education, so the public understands what is the quid pro quo if I take an action. They can deal with from an operational point of view. If you're fire or law enforcement and you have an area that is at more risk, you could move resources to those areas versus other areas that are at less risk. Insurance, and then also dealing with grants and awards. Currently in the state, and especially at this time, the governor and the legislature is giving out a lot of money to deal with wildfire mitigation. But right now, they don't have any tools out there to be able to say, we should award it for this area because they have a higher risk than this area over here. Right now, it's who's the best grant writer is really what's happening in the state. So we'll be talking about this. The biggest thing with dealing with the risk is the data collection. How do you deal with data collection at a large scale? So next slide. So what I wanted to show people by this slide is this. Is there a laser pointer available? That's fine, I'll just point. So on the CAL FIRE maps, you'll see is that they have these colors, and the red is a very high fire severity zone. So what a lot of people think is that if I live in one of these, this is where the fires are going to happen. That's a fallacy, because what I wanted to show you is this little nub here. This is from the 2017 Tubbs fire up by Santa Rosa. There's a residential development here that is the Coffee Park. And if you go to the next slide. Coffee Park, out of 5,600 structures, they lost 1,300 of them were just in that area. That area was outside of the CAL FIRE high fire hazard severity zones. So this just points to the position that there's a false sense of security for people in an area, thinking that if I don't live in that dark red area, I'm safe, okay? This is where the risk maps become a much better public education tool for the public to understand that there are some other areas that they should consider. Next slide. This slide will show the basic, this is the CAL FIRE severity zone maps. This is for the city and the greater Ojai Valley right here. The dark red area is the very high fire hazard zone. And you'll see on the next slide is just a subsection of just the city. This is what CAL FIRE has on their websites. This is the area that CAL FIRE and applicable regulations regulate. They don't regulate any of the other parcels, anything else within the city itself. So this is where on these maps, what they take into effect is topography, fuels, and some fire history. CAL FIRE is slated to upgrade these maps They're supposed to be done every 5 years. They haven't been done since 2007. And CAL FIRE, this is not a high priority of them to update this map. So what we're dealing with is when you're dealing with planning, dealing with grants, you're dealing with much outdated static information. So next slide. So what I wanted to do is to show you, to be able to begin to collect the data, is what we did is we created a data sampling tool. So in the first column, it has fixed factors, and the fixed factors are fire history and the basic data from the CAL FIRE severity zone maps. No matter what, you can't change the fixed factors. That's just what we encumbered. But then we start going into the risk factors, and the risk factors are the exterior exposure threat, ornamental landscaping, maintenance issues, home hardening, and defensible space. Then you'll see the color zones, and what we did is just created the 3 different color zones. So 0 to 6 is low, 7 to 12 is higher, and 12 plus is an area that needs to be really looked at. But now you can see that actually if I'm in the red area, I could go through these factors and I could do mitigation work at my residence, and I could actually turn the red to a yellow color. I could lower my risk. Currently in the CAL FIRE practice, that can't be done. You're either, once you're in the red zone in CAL FIRE, you're always in the red zone, and that's how it's treated. So this is a tool that we're looking at. The weighted factor, the factors that are up there are current industry factors that the Institute for Business and Home Safety goes with, as well as the National Fire Protection Agency, and many of the industry all agree with all those factors. What really needs to be done is a quantitative study on how you develop the scores for those categories. What we did is that we went through this and came up with a weighted factor, but they haven't been gone through an empirical study. So that's why what you'll be seeing is, for our purposes today, is an illustration of what this map and the data shows. Next slide. With everything else in life, there's things about liability and disclaimer. So what I had to do is I wrote this up just to be able to explain to people is how we came up with this map. This map being shown today is not being asked to be approved by the city or the council or anything official. This is strictly for demonstration or illustration purposes only. The data was developed by myself by driving on public streets, no private driveways, to be able to see what I could see, and based on experience and the factors we have here on how we came about the color coding of the map. It is parcel by parcel. It's about 3,000 parcels altogether. I do want to acknowledge Bob Daddy, Bill Wyrick, and Johnny Johnson for funding the part of the process for developing the GIS layers. So we have a spreadsheet with all the factors for every parcel that we have here. I volunteered my time, and that's how we came up with the project. The color coding on it can be changed if somebody was to approach and you did an on-site inspection, because only through a valid on-site inspection can you go 360 degrees around the structure to develop really what the real risk factors are. So that's the disclaimer. Next slide. This is actually now what you'll see is the map. This map has, by every parcel, there's the color coding that goes with it that's up on the legend. There's a lighter pink area that a lot of those were by the GIS process. There were some governmental school district and governmental parcels that we couldn't change the colors on. But this map, it just truly just reflects what's in the city, not what's in the valley. And we focused on the city because it's what's under the city's control and has authority to deal with. Let's go to the next map. This is probably the epitome of this whole project, to be able to see a side-by-side of what the maps show. You can very much see what CAL FIRE shows, what's on, as I look, it's on the right, and what the pilot project demonstrates by individual parcels, how the color coding is. So you can see that inside of the city, there is a wildfire hazard that's not recognized by the CAL FIRE map. This means that as the city goes, one might conduct public education campaigns, might get grants, and so forth to be able to change the colors from what a parcel is today to a different one. I recently had a meeting as of yesterday to give you a demonstration on this. I had a meeting with, it's called Team Rubicon. It's a veterans group that actually, they get grant funding to go out and do work. So in a perfect world, talking to them, what you could do is take this map and you can overlay disadvantaged populations, economic levels, and you can actually, with Team Rubicon, you could take and overlay a veterans population to each parcel. Team Rubicon could then use it, if we made the deal, you could use it in that they could go in and do mitigation work on veteran-owned properties that would be applicable to grants that they have. This is all conceptual. But this is the type of way, when you get finite information, you can start searching for grants and so forth to change the colors of the map. Changing the colors of the map is really a reflection of lowering the risk. In the state right now, the governor has quite a few grant programs. What they've picked is socially disadvantaged populations. So you could take a map like this, work with the governor's office, and say, with that overlay of the disadvantaged populations, could grant funds help those parcels change their colors? Okay. This does not need to be actually an official map for the city's use. You could actually use this map using with FEMA and other grantors, whether it's government or private, with the concept that now you have a baseline of what your hazards or your risks are in the city. Now with those baselines, now you have a perfect metric tool to be able to say, if we got grant money, we can change the colors to this. So most grantors, that's what they don't get with grants. All they do is give money and give money and give money. Most of them are much more willing to give money if they can see what the quid pro quo is. Next slide. So some of the questions I figured that might come up. Is it an official map? No, we went over that. How was the data acquired? I talked about that. I don't agree with color classification. How do I learn more? How do I change the color? And that's all through communication, through public education meetings. Will my insurance company use this map to help or hurt my coverage? No. This is a non-official map, and it's only a microscopic view. Insurance companies need a much more broad base to deal with their reinsurance market. So that answer is no. Are the very high fire severity zone maps being used if they're not current? They are, and it's because they don't have what we're talking about, the risk map. So it's the best of what the state has right now. And what is the future? We talked about the legislative action that's being taken now that will ultimately produce something, but it's still going to be 2 to 5 years, I would project, before something large scale is done. The biggest question is that I can drive around the city because I live here, I know the area, but I can't drive around the city of LA and inspect every parcel. So the challenge is a technology issue of how do you acquire the data and then keep it refreshed. But this map, you can see in a perfect world, would need to be done every year. So if somebody doesn't do their defensible space, then their color would change. It's one of the weighted factors. So that's the end of the presentation and what I offer to you. I do believe that this is something that's available for the future as the city's looking for ways to how to finance components within the framework for the wildfire safety. I'm available for questions.
Thank you so much, Bob. Really appreciate your expertise and time. And thank you, Bob, and thank you, Bill, and thank you, Johnny, for funding this. Really generous and important.
I have a quick question. Bob, it seems like the labor-intensive issue is a big part of the problem here. Would you be able to maybe get a jump on that from a labor productivity point of view, of maybe getting some preliminary Google Street View work done, and then have criteria or have use that as a screening for maybe more microscopic, on-site work? I'm just trying to think about the labor issue of how to improve that problem.
Yeah, currently on another project I'm working with, we're actually working with Google to use between their satellites and their data collection from the Street View.
Right.
And trying to get those two to marry up. Right now, Google's being used within emergency services to create all the damage assessment reports.
Okay.
It's just trying to identify, it's a technology issue
It's
on.
not going to displace the personal visits, I understand that, but it
No.
might help kind of frame.
Right. To do the mass data gathering, we need to do something like that.
Okay. All right.
I had just a couple questions. The way I kind of look at the map is, from the city's standpoint, is how do we figure out how to get rid of as much red and then eventually as much orange as possible on those maps, which there wasn't much red, but there was a lot of orange, right? And I think, is it yellow is the lowest risk?
Right.
So how do we get to yellow? So this is probably a longer conversation between you and I, but just, I guess, for sake of people watching or the public, were there like 2 or 3 simple things that people can do to drop that risk number that you saw consistently throughout town? And then that will tie in with, we're coming back to council soon with some recommendations of some simple steps people can take to fire harden. But were there some common themes that you saw, or things that kind of push people from the orange to the red frequently?
Probably the biggest things on the houses that within the city that are in the darker colors is, one is maintenance of the tree canopy around their home. And especially right now, all of us who live in town, the oak trees are shedding leaves and acorns like crazy, okay? Those, when they dry out, they're a fuel. So it's a maintenance issue. Clean up around your home. This is not a one and done type of thing. The other thing is the home hardening. I can go around town, especially a lot of the old craftsman homes. They have inadequate vent screen sizing around the homes for ember cast. The Defensible Space Program has been a great asset that the county fire has done and it continues to enforce. So I'd say right now is home hardening and maintenance would be the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful, and ties in with one of the items we'll get to later, is that the Building Appeals Board had made some recommendations regarding some of those issues. Council's asked staff to come back to council with some options for those issues. So I think long term, what we would hope is that when we take those actions, that when we look in a year or two, that we start seeing less and less of the red and more of the yellow. So that's interesting. But you said something that also sticks in my head, which we've had challenges with is people forget you have to do this stuff every year, and everything all the vegetation grows back, and so you might be yellow for now and orange if you aren't paying attention again for long. So, thank you.
Mayor, Mr. Vega, I'd like to weigh in. Code enforcement needs to have some additional language, and it needs to have some additional ability. An awful lot of this stuff is just garbage and trash, and it's accumulation. And it's really a code enforcement, it's a health and safety issue, it's a code enforcement issue. I would hope that we can, when we propose things where, we give them a nice little note that says, hey, this is, and please, let's go ahead and remove this. And please, you're not supposed to park your car and leave it on the street indefinitely, because we need to sweep up the leaves and stuff, and we're not doing that. And then at the insistence of our prior fire chief and police, it wasn't a fire, it was the police chief, that we go ahead and we put in home numbers. That's never been followed up on. City Council put a $5 or $10 a day fine on everybody that doesn't have 4-inch visible numbers in the streets. And that was something that was done as a safety. It appears to me that since we have a half a dozen cleanup issues, we could put them all together on a single sheet and maybe get our auxiliary to go around and drop these things off to people's homes and have 6 things and put a check mark and a phone number to call, right? And then they list and they get back to you folks to see if something's happening. We have an awful lot of people that have got an awful lot of junk and an awful lot of debris, and the city does it too. We have a huge amount of people now that the Baldwin unit is closed are dumping chips everywhere within the city because they're not going to pay for the freight to take it to Fillmore. Now, I'm aware of the fact that we're going to have to buy mulch, but stacking mulch in huge quantities when we have these 50, 60 mile an hour winds, we have lightning storms, we're going to have, this one rain did not stop fire season from coming. This isn't enough. We get the embers into these great big giant piles of mulch everywhere in the city. We're not going to be able to have a cohesive fire line. It's going to jump everywhere. So I think you need to develop some code issues, and there needs to be a communication issue, because a lot of people think they're doing the right thing. But we know that mulch was the reason that the Upper Ojai Valley School burned to the ground. And we have people, including the city of Ojai, that have got wood that's been cut down from trees, logs that have been stacked up for years for no meaning. And so we just need to kind of clean up Ojai. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, my question always to all of us as Team Ojai, how are we going to get the money and who's going to get the money? So I'm just throwing that out to all of us because we got to figure it out. And I'm looking at you, Bob, because do you have any ideas?
I'm willing to work with the city on developing some ideas on how to come up with funding sources. I think with this, using this as a tool.
Your microphone.
Sorry. I'm willing to work with the city to help develop some funding sources as a result. With this as a tool, people I've talked with FEMA are interested, other people are, because nobody else is using this concept, this philosophy. So they're looking at this as kind of a model for other areas. And so if we can actually get a grant and actually turn the metrics around, it would help drive a lot of projects for other grantors.
Great, thank you. That's super exciting. And I wrote every word down, so thank you.
Mayor Sticks, to follow up on that just a little bit. So you believe this is, you mentioned that this is the kind of thing grants are looking for, issuers are looking for. You believe that this tool you've developed is at a level of finesse and rigor sufficient to be a positive factor in grant applications at this point?
At this point, until the state and others come up with an empirical study on the
Okay.
weighted percentage of the factors, I think it will.
And do you have any prospects, since we're looking at fire ecology here, which doesn't respect jurisdictional lines, any possibility of funding for at least the sphere, moving into our sphere of influence, as LAFCO defined for the city? Because that's important. Fires start on the other side of the city line, they're not going to respect. And it would seem like an obvious thing that we start to expand out this approach into the unincorporated area, particularly first in the sphere of influence.
Yeah, I think what we have is a tool as a baseline to help with projects just in the city. But I think to use this as a tool, we can search for additional grant funds to actually take this philosophy valley-wide.
Any county money for that?
I can't speak to that, but I think that there is possibly some federal money that's going to be available to do that same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, we have a lot of outstanding people in this community. I went ahead and found somebody that was very proficient in writing grants outside of the system when I owned the paper. This was from another organization. And I went ahead and had her write a grant for a new website for us. And it's writing grants is writing grants. You just change what you're doing. We won that grant out of 484 other applicants. So we have people here, and I think we need to explore some individuals that do this all the time. And what was interesting is I came to an agreed amount to get this grant written, and she came back and said, hey, didn't have to spend that much time, let's just lower the cost to this. So I believe we have the people available. I don't believe it's that expensive. I believe, and pardon me, but if we can give $50,000 to Sierra and wait all this time, and we can give different grants and different monies to everybody, it appears that the best dollar we can spend is somebody to get us money. So anyhow, I would hope that the city, you got your Measure C and you got your, cannabis tax, with the help of the paper pushing both of those through. And I would hope that you can allocate a tiny bit and get a couple of grant writers. FireSafe is doing their things, they're getting theirs, but they're doing it for a different purpose. And the city can direct exactly what it wants for our purpose. So I would urge you to do that. I'd be more than happy to communicate who it was and the details. But we got an outstanding result.
That'd be great. Thank you, Bob. Can we talk later? Thanks. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Bob, for that. And really exciting and cutting edge. Let's change the metric. Okay, let's move on to item B. The subject is the discussion of the fire preparation and planning. And the recommendation is that the Disaster Council discuss and review Ojai's. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you, but so if we have any comments on all those action steps in Part 5 in A, is now the time to bring them up, or?
Oh, okay. Do you want? Yeah. I'm sorry.
Just
Yeah.
ask
Go
you.
ahead.
I had a
If you have comments on this
I'm going
document?
to circle back, do you think? To the rest of A?
To Bob's.
No,
To the-
I would
to
say
that.
if we have
Okay.
comments on that, we should.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just had a couple comments
On the
on
map.
other parts of A, if that's all
Okay,
right,
yeah, sure.
before we move
Yeah,
on.
sorry.
First of all, I'd like to, just what Mr. Daddy just pointed out, we know that the Ojai Valley has probably the highest percentage of green waste in the total waste stream of any part of Ventura County. We know that from E.J. Harrison and Sons. And yet, the county shut down our green processing area inside this valley, and despite a lot of assurances, has not gotten it back reopened, which results in a fire risk because of just what Mr. Daddy was talking about. People don't want to pay, don't want to go to the trouble to properly process the green waste, and so we get problems that create fire risk. And so I just want to express a continued frustration with the fact that the county doesn't get that green waste processing area rebooted, and I don't know what the problem is. It's been years now, literally. Speaking to the fire department, I think it's an issue that I wish you would help us pressure the county on, because it is a fire risk matter, I believe, anyway, not to mention a traffic problem, greater vehicle miles traveled. It's one of those structural things that, I just have been kind of beating on, because I don't want to see it fall off the radar here. And we get used to the fact that we don't have a green processing center in the valley that we used to take for granted, and we start just getting complacent and accepting that as a permanent state of affairs. So I just making those comments. The other thing I wanted to just point out, it was very interesting, and thank you, Chief McNeil, for the comments you made at the Democrat Club. It really helped educate me a lot. I always learn something listening to you guys. But the point about the discussion of Santa Rosa and the importance of looking at the fire risk as an ember cast issue and not a fire front issue. And where that becomes, I think, very important is to that we understand that the work and action step number 9 is in fact and the fire hardening of individual structures, which create embers if the structure. It was enlightening for me to understand that a lot of the Santa Rosa ember cast was from structures, not from vegetation. So that's where the fire hardening of structures is so important. But it's also why it's so important to handle the vegetation issues, because if you can remove the vegetation that has disproportionate tendency to embercast problems, you also maybe stop the ignition of the fire of some of the structures that then cascade into even more embercasts. So again, I just think it's important that we stay focused on the invasive species issue. And I just wanted to make those 2 comments, because I have to admit, as you can tell from my tone of voice, I'm frustrated with the county's lack of action on the rebooting the Green Processing Center. I think it's an ongoing structural problem for our fire risk management.
Yeah, and we've submitted letters of support, and we've contacted, I think it's David Goldstein at the county who's really pushing to get that going. We've told them anything the city can do to help that we
Well,
would
and
support
that's
that.
why I kind of maybe asked the fire department if maybe they could help the city, push that matter.
Yeah. I think, along those lines, I think that is, it's a point in relation to the grant funding and some of these other discussions too is, I look at what the city did yesterday. The city provided $50,000 in seed money to the Fire Safe Council that will, that has led to $1 million in grants and potentially may lead to $3 million in grants for the county. And for the region, Ventura, or the Ojai Valley Community Wildfire Prevention Plan and some of these other regional projects. But I will push back a little bit when we say let's hire a grant writer for the city. I want to caution, definition of insanity. City keeps trying to hire a grant writer to get a grant for the city on wildfire. That's not going to be as effective as the county, working with the county and collaborating and making sure that the county is focusing on wildfire in the region, because any wildfire in Ojai is probably starting outside of the city limits. So I do want to caution there. I think I've heard the idea floated a couple times of paying a high level grant writer for the city, but ultimately it needs to be a partnership with the county and to be effective. So anyway.
Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on then to item B, the fire preparation and planning. So here we have Ojai's Wildfire Resiliency Framework Action Plan Draft.
So with that, I just have a brief introduction. This is intended to be kind of like an open discussion regarding fire, because we are, for all intents and purposes, in the heart of our new fire season in the Ojai Valley, which apparently is now October through December, it feels like. Although we say fire season really is year round, but that's when we've had some fires recently. So this is intended to be kind of an open discussion regarding all the fire preparation and planning. We also wanted to come back with the action plan because the council has reviewed and approved that, and we've started to implement it. So we'll also talk a little bit about that. But to kick off, I wanted to first welcome our new disaster council member, Chief McNeil, and who was officially appointed with approval of the city council yesterday. And so thank you, Chief McNeil, for volunteering your time and knowledge and of not just fires, but also the Ojai Valley. So welcome aboard. But so I will quickly kind of walk us through. I think Andrea is going to share her screen to show the framework plan, or the Ojai Wildfire Resiliency Framework. It's also in the packet, so everybody should have it in front of them if it's hard to read on screen. But for people watching on Zoom or people watching on YouTube, it is now, we're showing the screen. So the City Council adopted this framework on August 24th, 2021. This is the framework we had reviewed at the prior the prior disaster council meeting. And we're making progress on some of these items, so I won't belabor the point, but I'll go quickly through some of the ones we're currently working on. I mentioned earlier, item 1, identifying and adopting home hardening building code updates and potentially guidelines. And I think as part of that, the Building Appeals Board had their meeting and recommended code enforcement options as well, which the City Council then asked staff to investigate and come back with. So that the Building Appeals Board has made recommendations. The Council has received those recommendations, and now staff is going to be coming back. We're expecting to come back at one of the next 2 meetings with that item and some steps that will be implemented there. So that is in progress as we speak. Item 2, the messaging signboards for emergency messages. Those are in progress, and it's actually the next item on the agenda. We'll give a little update on that, so I'll save that for the next item. 3, utilizing the county's resurrected cert function, which again speaks to kind of the point from a couple minutes ago. A lot of these things, to be successful, need to be a partnership with the county. And the good news there is that we were able to work with Supervisor Levere's office and Brian Brennan in his office to kind of kick off that. And we did that at Ojai Day. We had a CERT booth that had CERT information and CERT signups, and there will be some online CERT programming coming soon through Supervisor Levere's office and Brian Brennan. Item 4, continuing to grow our communications and information dissemination functions. The thing we've done recently while we've been working through this is we launched our new My Ojai smartphone application. The My Ojai smartphone application has emergency push notifications, and we've used those recently. I believe we are now over 1,000 downloads for our smartphone app, which for a city our size is pretty huge. When we purchased that app, the app company had said that they would expect a city our size would have 250 to 300 downloads based on what they see in other cities, the percentage of residents. We have over 1,000 people who've downloaded that app, and we're sending push notifications through that app. And so that was part of the next step. We've kind of increased our Facebook presence, we've increased our website presence, but that is the next step in what we're looking to do. We also have an update that will be the 4th item on the agenda about some enhancements to our radio station. So I won't get into that, but just to mention that was another communication and information process that we've been working on. Andrew, can you flip to the next page? So item 5, we've had a meeting with Red Cross representative, and we're likely going to schedule a meeting where Red Cross can come and present at one of the next couple of disaster council meetings. So we've been working on that as well. We also have made progress with the county to actually move forward on a MOU to use Seoul Park Golf Course as an alternative shelter site. We have drafted an MOU and sent it to the county, and the county was very positive, and they are reviewing it and will give us feedback, but they've indicated that they think that there's potential there for us to work together on this. Number 6, the viable risk assessment. We just went over. We received our presentation that is has been in progress, and we are now moving towards next steps on that. And then item, let me see. Andrea, can you go to the page 404? Item 10, I mentioned already that we were working with Supervisor Levere's office to bring back CERT. Item 11 was completed because it was essentially preparing and completing this checklist. Item 12, we held the community readiness event on May 27th. And so those are the ones I wanted to just kind of mention as we are launching or as we adopt this plan. Those are the ones that are in progress and in the works as we speak. So that is kind of the summary of where we are with that Wildfire Resiliency Framework Action Plan. Other than that, again, the item was intended to just allow for any other issues or discussion regarding fire preparation and planning. So that is all I have for that item.
Thank you, James. I just want to say bravo and thank you for all your hard work. And I see your name under the lead person mostly.
I don't know where he finds the time. I really don't.
Thank you.
Sticks.
Bob?
Can we go back to item 7, James?
Yes.
When I created Ojai Flow, and it was time to communicate to the public, we would overfill Matilaha. We would overfill every facility, and we were limited to parking. So we had an immense amount of people that are engaged. If you can explain what's happening and let them know the importance, they will get involved. When we got the lawsuit between the city's website, the paper's website, the personal people showing up, we had well over 1,000 people engaged. And so what I'd like you to do is I'd really like you to expand item 7. And I mean, I would get involved. We have a half a dozen insurance agents that represent the majority of companies. Maybe we can co-sponsor and help mitigate some of this cost for the city, and the insurance companies can get there and try to partner with you so we can get people to really understand cause and effect and what's happening, and get them behind some of these initiatives that Chief Roper has developed, where they understand the real importance of what happens in the house-to-house spread. So I would hope that we could have a further discussion, private or public or whenever, and expand that and see what we can do for the future. Because the communication issue is going to be, one of the most important things that we can do. People need to know ahead of time where they need to be and what's going to happen. So.
Yeah.
I would
Thank you.
also just recommend that you use the county fire, has staff that can really take the lead on that for you. One less thing you have to do.
Thank you. We'll make sure to do that.
Yeah, thank you, because he needs one less thing.
Well, it's one of the things with any public workshops right now. Obviously, the elephant in the room is it's like, how many people can we get together? Can we do these things indoors? So that was kind of the two items that that we didn't have much of an update on were related to getting people in groups at this time, which we're I don't want to say dragging our feet on, but we're trying to buy some time so that we can do that with people feeling comfortable and safe. So that's something we'll be looking to do probably early next year. So I'll work with County Fire, and also I'll check back in with you, Bob, on that too. So.
Thank you, Mayor Sticks. I had a couple more comments about that I want to suggest to County Fire just for consideration. One is that I'm not an attorney, but just, the county fire department, the county fire district has their own set of ordinances that apply to the entire county, the entire fire protection district. And right now, with respect to the removal of the regional fuel reductions program, the brush clearance issue, it's defined as a distance from individual structures. But if you have a tremendous concentration of fire risk in a particular area that's not within a certain proximity to structures, it's really not covered by your current brush clearance ordinance. And I really think perhaps the city, since we have a particular issue of wildland interface here, maybe we could develop some suggestions for the fire department, the fire district to consider in terms of ordinance modification that would expand the definition of brush clearance that property owners are responsible for more than just distance from structures, particularly for large acreage property owners, for example, that are letting a brush concentration create an ignition spread ember cast issue that is a risk for everyone around them, but there's no structures immediately adjacent. So I would like to see if we could look at that for possible ordinance modification. And the other one that I wanted to think about in terms of ordinance modification at the fire district level is the adoption of standards for fire hydrants. There are reference standards by AWWA, by national organizations, for maintenance and testing of fire hydrants that can be adopted by reference, maybe by the fire district, for all the water utilities in the county, that has direct benefits in terms of recognition by the insurance industry in terms of insurability. And I don't know if that's been looked at, but just a thought that maybe we could have further discussion on.
I can pursue your questions and comments with our prevention department and pull up applicable codes that apply to what we have for new construction, and obviously grandfathering of other things would have to be looked into as well.
Okay. So that would be the interaction level for the city, would be with the fire prevention department then, if we wanted to explore some of these ideas. Okay, thank you.
And Chief, a quick question. I went over and inspected a house on Country Club that had been totally redone. And for the fire sprinkler requirement, he was told 130 PSI was not adequate.
I cannot speak to
130
that. I'd have
PSI is double the load that you can put in a home.
I'd have to reference that through the codes and the policies that were pushed through prevention for the permitting process. I don't have the answer to that.
Okay. What I'd like to do is I'll get you the name and the address and send it to you, because 130 PSI
It is not adequate.
that's what he was told when he put it in by the fire department. But 130 PSI will blow all your feed lines off the wall. It's just staggering amount of so somehow between the fire and the city, we need to come up with some number that's consistent. That
For this
people
specific issue, if you can, we'll meet offline here, and you can give me the information. I'll
Sure.
pursue whatever questions you have.
Okay.
And so on this item, I'll note, so just kind of as, I realized I jumped right into it, but as a reminder, so this action plan that we are working through was the city, kind of in light of everything we've been talking about, with the city being the hole in the donut and only having control over the city limits. These were the items that we had said that the city was going to take lead on and start making sure and working with the various agencies to make sure that we can get these things accomplished and help our city become better prepared for a potential wildfire. So I wanted to start with that and update everybody on how that went and where we're at with it. And I think the progress is good, but we have some work to do, I think, is really the conclusion. Other than that, though, I guess, I think that is really city specific. So I guess, I would ask our county reps, what you're seeing, how are we looking for fire preparation? What are we expecting this year? And, what are we doing to prepare? So, I think, between, our fire and police chief, I'd ask for just a brief update from each agency. So. Yeah, I guess I'm asking, can you just give us an update on what you're seeing, if anything, and what we're doing to prepare? So, and I guess I'll note that's probably more a question for fire than for PD. I think for you guys, it's mostly preparing for potential evacuations. Yeah. Yeah, so just, what I was getting at is like, this is the focus, like the city's focus, but, obviously we don't fight the fires. So what's the county seeing? How's this year looking? One of the things we've talked about in the past is that we said for a long time, after 5 years, the fuel will be back after the Thomas fire. I think we're at year 4 coming up in a month. So what are we seeing? And then just for the public, how are we preparing for those?
Okay, well, every year, we have we take the fuel moistures around different parts of the county. And those are determined on when the fuel moisture concentrations come in, when it reaches down to the 60th percentile, or that is what we call critical percentage of fuel moisture. And that's a trigger point we use every year for, depending on how we're going to staff different equipment or when the winds come in. So we're tied in every time there's a weather scenario that comes in. We look at what our fuels are in the area, different areas, and then we look at we tie in with the National Weather Service, and we get an update on winds. Like we talked about the Embercast, and that's a big concern. So this is a process that occurs every year. It's just a rolling process that we do. There's nothing new that we're doing this year necessarily than we did last year. We realize that a majority of the fuels are at their critical low capacity, but a majority of the fuel has been modified over the years because of the amount of fires we've had in Ventura County. There's different pockets that have not had burns in over 20 years, and that's some down in the Malibu area and different parts of Thousand Oaks. But a majority of the areas that's burned from Santa Paula this direction, if we get a fire and it's going to be of lower intensity, we have additional aircraft that CAL FIRE has staffed. So those are the preparations we do every year. There's really nothing different. Is just we can give you updates on a monthly basis of what that fuel the fuel's moistures are. And if we go into a plan, I can obviously be in touch with you, Mr. Vega, and give you that information.
I think with the rain this week, I've already heard some people say, well, that helps with the fire. I guess question for you, does that help with the fire, or, does it
Washes
actually
the dust off the brush is what it does. All it takes is a few days of Santa Ana winds where it drops that fuel moisture. Fuel moistures drop differently in like flashy fuels, grasses and stuff will dry out much faster with a little bit of rain versus what we call 3 or 5 hour to 20 hour, 1,000-hour fuels, where you get the bigger diameter. It takes much longer to dry out. But since we haven't had any rains, and those larger fuels have been drying out and are more readily combustible. For example, you've seen the amount of forest fires that they just rage because they're like tendered. There's not that much moisture to hold back the fire, the combustion. So I can give you updates on a monthly basis on if we go into plans that affect the community up here for extra staffing or increased wind events. I will make sure that you're informed of that information if we have that.
Thank you.
In place.
Thank you. And I think the message that we always try to give the public is, like, yes, we are all working hard to be the most prepared we can be for these, but I think at the end of the day, like we always say, is every person watching this or now or watching it later or just thinking about it is everybody should take the steps to fire harden their homes, and everybody should take the steps to be prepared, because it probably is a matter of when, not if, that we have another fire. So
I agree with you.
thank you.
From the home out, right? Always from the home out. Yeah, and thank you, Chief Leak. We really appreciate that. Monthly updates would be wonderful, so that we can also communicate that to the public. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may make a few comments. As far as the Sheriff's Department update, last year we implemented the high-low siren for evacuations, which is really important for folks to know. We'll probably start pushing that out more often on social media just as a reminder. And maybe we can put it on the city site as well. It's been on there once before, but I think as we're right in the middle of fire season, it's going to continue on. I think it's important for folks to know that. Another thing that we might want to push out is the Ready, Set, Go program on social media, so folks start to get into their mind what they need to prepare for in case there is an emergency. As far as the Sheriff's Department, we also have a team of deputies that assisted during evacuations,
Well, now they're working. Can you hear me?
during prior emergencies, during the Woolsey fire. It's just a team of deputies that can respond within
going off.
24 hours, and I think we saw that during the Thomas fire where we had we went from a couple deputies in the city to about 50 that responded out here to assist. So we do have that team available, and like I mentioned, they can be out here in the matter of a couple hours to assist. And also another big thing is not just for fire or the police, but it's actually for every resident in the city to be on fire watch. We have a few eyes that are out there that's, if they see smoke, call the fire department, call the police department. We'll be more than happy to go out and check to see if that smoke is actually really something serious or can develop into something serious, and we can mitigate that issue right away before it gets into something pretty big, So, and a few other things, sign up for the city website. That's really important for updates, and also VC Alert for any emergency information that needs to go out. So.
Yeah, thank you. We talked to a lot of people about VC Alert on Ojai Day, and a lot of people are signed up, but there's still a surprising amount of people that don't know about it, and or that had said they signed up and then they moved from Thousand Oaks to Oakview, and they didn't realize they needed to change their address. So that's something that's always a good reminder, and we'll post some of this information online to remind everybody as well. So.
And I would
Mr.
like to
Vega?
reiterate on the vcfd.org site, it has the Ready, Set, Go information on it. Okay. And it answers, on the community education portion of it, there's a lot of information that people can look up and answer their questions that they may have.
Cool.
Mr. Vega?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't use the websites or the social media or the Twitter, and it's generally our mature population. When I was a kid growing up at 8 o'clock the first Monday of the month, the air raid sirens went off. If we go out there with the high-low, people are not going to be familiar. What I would like to see us do is get into a habit at a certain time that's regular, that people can count on. Have the high-lows go off for a few minutes so people get used to it, they understand it, they're aware it's regular. So when it comes at a different time, they'll know. The other thing I would like to see is activate that radio station and have somebody within the city or in the city government go ahead and actually make a 2-minute or a 3-minute, hey, here's what's going on. This is active at 1610. We're here to broadcast real time. We'll let you know what's going to happen. These are the different things. I think we need to get into a routine where people are aware. That's the biggest problem. Because when we lost everything, our 911 reverse didn't work. Nothing worked. No computer, no lights, no nothing. Nothing worked at all. But what will work is this siren. That will work. And people will understand that they need to go to 1610 because that's the only reliable way we have to transmit information. And I'd like us to lock those two together and then just start making an awareness campaign where we just let them know all the time. We blast it off a few times. And hopefully you can come up with some type of a program where people get into the habit. The other thing is this. We have 850,000 visitors that come in here that don't have a clue. Now, if we can get the roadsides out, that helps, but if we can get those markers that put the 1610 marker, just like they do on 395, where when you drive in, you take a look, you see what it is, everybody's aware. And everybody has AM radio except for electric vehicles. So, that's the majority. It's not going to be us. We know where Seoul Park is. We know where this is. We know where the high school is. We got to do with all the tourists that know nothing. So I'm just hoping we can do an aware program. Thank you.
I agree with a lot of what you said. The one thing I'll disagree with you about is Ojai has figured out how to use Facebook, and I wish they hadn't, but they have figured out how to use Facebook. but all your other points are well taken. So I think, Mayor, that was the report.
Okay.
I think the other thing I'll mention is I think he's aware of this, but I've drafted Chief McNeil into helping us with implementing a lot of these framework items. So he and I will be working closely on these and providing reports back to the Disaster Council. So.
And thank you so much, Chief McNeil. Much appreciated.
Yeah, sure. I've been intentionally quiet over here, just really absorbing a lot of this. I was at the meeting last night, absorbing, all the work that the Fire Safe Council is going to do with their grant funding and what the city's portion is going to be, and there's a lot going on here, and I look forward to being somewhat of a liaison between the agencies if I can help there, and all these action items that you've mentioned for sure.
Thank you.
I even downloaded the My Ojai app last night
Oh.
after discussion with someone else in the audience. And I do have one question on the notifications of that. Is that an automatic notification when you sign up?
So that
Or is that something you have to actually do?
It's funny, it depends on the device. And so we're actually putting together some PR to tell people to check their settings, because some devices, when you download it, it's by default, you get the notifications. Some of them, namely Apple, which is the probably the most popular one, you have to tell it it's allowed to send notifications. Right. So we're going to do some PR on that so people are aware of it coming up. So.
Right.
And then just one more piece of the puzzle. Patrick Maynard was the Director of Emergency Services, was going to come last night, couldn't make it, so he will be coming in December.
Yes, we're scheduling it. We think it'll be December.
Okay, and specifically, he'll talk about evacuation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
excellent, thank you.
All right, shall we move on to the
Let's
next
move
item?
on to C, consideration of a permanent emergency message board located at Rotary Park.
Yeah, and our own our technical specialist, James Hahn, has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this, so he's going to walk us through some of the information. I'll give some background. This is in our plan. It's in our framework that we just talked about, so it's something we're trying to move forward. We've talked about this before at Disaster Council. We had talked about it at the last meeting before COVID hit, and then it kind of got sidetracked from there due to budget and other issues at that point. But we had talked about creating this emergency message board that would be kind of the first, or not the first, but a big step towards making sure that everybody could stay informed, and the people that aren't able to use some of the other functions, or if a fire hits and internet or power goes out, that we'd have ways to communicate still. When we last talked about this at Disaster Council, at that point, I want to say it was February of 20, the consensus was we had looked at some different signboards, and Camarillo at Constitution Park had one that the full Disaster Council indicated that we would want it to be similar to theirs. So James Hahn has tracked down the person who installed that one and was able to get some quotes and some designs, and so he's going to walk us through that quickly. And then what we're asking for is basically consensus from the committee to move forward with this and go to City Council for approval. So.
Okay. You stole some of my thunder there.
Sorry.
So I reached out to the staff city City of Camarillo, they told me it was Vogue Signs. I called Vogue Signs, set up an appointment with them. I was told that Rotary Park was what you guys had decided last February, so I went out and we walked the area and we picked a location near the Ojai sign. We're trying to place it so that it's visible from both Maricopa and from 150 as people are passing any direction. They'll be able to see it. And then be respectful of the environment that's already there. So in Camarillo, the base that they put it on just is like a little concrete base and then the sign. So I asked him to give us some renderings of what it would look like if we actually put a rock fascia on it and made it look more like what's already there. He came back with 5 different designs. So should have brought the mouse up here. So the first design he came back with, which is just a massive rock base. He didn't like it, neither did we, so we asked him to go back to the drawing board and come back with some other signs. There's also 2 different size signs, so these top ones are all 3x8, and then the bottom 2 are the 4x8 signs. They're all the exact same panels as what was used in Camarillo. They're just reconfigured on the sizing. And then we did reach out to the Rotary Club. They had a meeting last night. I haven't heard what they said, but the initial response was just be careful not to encroach on the Welcome to Ojai sign. So we're trying to be as respectful as we can with that and get it placed in a good position. Vogue Signs has actually never done anything with a battery backup. I've been researching options for that, and I've actually identified a inverter that I think will work really well for it. It's you power the inverter during normal time, and it charges batteries, which gives a pure sine wave that will power the sign. The inverter can actually give up to 30 amps. I'm not exactly sure what the load will be yet. As soon as I know what the load will be, then we'll calculate the battery bank size and go from there. And then at the very end of the line, last resort, I will put a generator transfer switch so that if we're out for longer than the batteries will last, we can plug in a generator. It's actually exactly the same solution I did with AM 1610. After the Thomas fire, we found out that the batteries were no good, all the utility burnt up, and I installed a generator transfer switch there, so it's something we've already done.
Yeah, and so for us, resiliency of it is very important. We were, obviously our goal if things go really bad and the fire hits and power goes out, that this we want to make sure this has multiple levels of redundancy to be able to work. So, did you want to show, James, just quickly how it would look from the back side of them, and then can you give us kind of the ballpark cost estimates on these?
Sorry, so many things open on this computer right now.
Mr. Vega,
Yeah.
if we were able to get grant funding commensurate, would there be entertainment of putting 2 signs, one at each end of the city?
Yes, and that was going to be one of the part of what we were going to explain is that at this point, so the cost came in. I'll get to that while James is pulling up the backside. The cost estimate did come in higher than what we had initially expected, but it's because we put a focus on the aesthetics of the sign, and we went a little bigger, or we are recommending going a little bigger than we had originally planned for. So I think we had originally estimated $10,000 to $15,000 per sign. This one came back, or the ballpark of these is between $35,000 and $45,000, depending on exactly which one we go with. But so at this time, we were recommending doing the main one at the Y. But the second part of it was going to be talking about how we can move forward with that second one. And I think that would be a good one to say, let's try to obtain some grants to make up that difference. So.
Okay, so these are some renderings. They're not as pretty because it's actually just a screen grab I did off from Google Maps and sent to the guy. So the color is a little faded.
Yeah, and these are in our packets for everybody in the room if you can't see.
It does give an idea. So these are exactly the same ones. So A was that large rock base, and then the B and C were more like the pillar design. So you reduce some of the massing on that. And then the D and E are the pillar designs with the larger screen. So the smaller screens range from 35,000 to 38,000, and the larger is 42 to 44,000.
Yeah, and this was a project we had identified that could be funded through Measure C. As I said, we had identified a little less funding, so at this point we're recommending proceeding with one. We want to see. We reached out to Rotary for feedback, as James mentioned, and then we wanted to get feedback from this group. If there's consensus from everybody to move forward, then we are pretty much ready, willing, and able to move forward to City Council. So I think with that, we'll take any questions if there are any feedback.
I can see right off the bat we've got two big signs that are going to obscure that. One is the Seoul Park sign. I don't know how important that is. And then the other one is that Caltrans sign that you see off the left that partially obscures. Depending on where you are coming down that hill past Rotary Park, that's pretty much going to block that. In traffic, it will be intermittent visibility. So I would recommend that you remove everything from line of sight for at least 50, 75 yards so people have a chance to read it, and then they have a chance to understand the thing and look back again if they need to. Okay.
Yeah, I would say when we were on site, that is one of the things we were doing is standing in obviously you can't drive down the road and look at it. We were standing where we expected the sign to be and see how far we could see drivers' faces. And we were just messing around trying to get it around the sign as much as we could. It's definitely a little compromise trying to figure all this out. So that is something
And one last thought. Let's at least have the monument match the rock that Rotary spent a fortune for. And it would match the rest of the welcome to Ojai motif. So it just doesn't, that kind of looks like they put it in granite instead of our Ojai sandstone. And so I would certainly hope that it would at least be congruent.
No, when we were on site, he was very well aware of what type of rock we were wanting. It may look different here because this is just a rendering. It's not real.
We also, another point along those lines too is we when we met with Vogue,
Hey, Nancy, I can't remember, this Jeffrey, exactly what the time was.
Jeff, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
When we met on site, we did talk to them about the ability to back up, to be able to post there both remotely and then plug in if internet goes down. So
I totally forgot to cover that. So under normal operations, this thing has a cellular connection. Mm-hmm. We log into a website, we make the changes we need to make. As we all know, cellular does tend to go down during emergencies, in which case we can drive up to within 300 feet of it, log into a private Wi-Fi connection to it, and do the same thing directly. So.
Yep.
In terms of specific, I agree with everything that's been said so far. And thank you very much, James. As usual, thorough research. In terms of a particular one, I'm just going to say I like Personally, I'm going to advocate for the 4x8. I think it's always more readable than the 3x8, and that's going to be important when we have, smoky and other kind of situations. And I prefer D over E just because I think it reduces the width. An important issue is impinging on the view of the monument sign. And I understand the aesthetics of having the two pillars on E to match the pillars on the monument sign, but I think it's better to go with D and be narrower to have a less of an impact on the monument sign. Just those are my very minor comments and preferences.
James, I have a quick question. How many lines per screen can you fill as far as?
Yeah, I was hoping the 4x8 might allow 3 lines.
It's actually, it depends. You can think of these actually as a computer screen, so it depends on what size font we decide to go with. Obviously, we're going to want something at least 3 inches so that it's visible at highway speeds. People drive.
So that's another reason for the 4x8 to be more readable.
Yep.
With more lines then, yeah.
That's a good question. I want to give some credit to Chief Rivera. I know why he's thinking that is because he's been keeping our signboards up during COVID and, and even prior to that when we had some fire weather and stuff. And so he's the one that has to figure out how many words he can fit on the screen at this point. So.
Mr. Vega, I would move this forward for action as proposed with a recommendation of the 4x8 screen and the other comments that we've heard.
Thank you.
I second
I'll
that
second
motion.
that.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Well, thanks again, James. That was beautiful work and really much appreciated. And,
Thank you, James.
James is another one of our unsung heroes, believe me.
well, let's sing it right now. Thank you, James. All right, well, we'll move on to our last item, D, Emergency Management Performance Grant Award Update.
Yeah, and I'll keep this very brief because I know we've gone pretty long. James and I had applied last year for a grant. This grant opportunity comes up every year, and in the past, the city, years back, I was told the city never applied for it, so we've started to apply for it. And essentially, this year we applied for a 50-50 match because we need to update some of the radio equipment to be more reliable and just to update the for example the computer that holds all the messaging and schedules all the messaging and all that kind of stuff. So we applied for it this year and we were awarded the grant. We have a $10,000 it's $10,176.81, which is half of the cost, which is the most that they can award. So we were just reporting back on that and noting that means we will be able to do some of these upgrades on the AM radio station, which is another part of our action plan. So it's really just a receive and file that's moving forward, and we just wanted to let everybody know. So.
Thank you, James. Nice work.
Thanks.
I have one other question. Mr. Roper made an incredible, riveting movie about fire hardening, and I hope all of you can see it. How do we proceed with that?
Yeah, so we were talking about this and the idea that we would potentially post it on our TV channel or radio station. So one of the things I think we'll do, we wanted to get Disaster Council's consensus on it. I guess we should have had it queued up. But what we could do is we could send it out to the Disaster Council and ask everybody for feedback. So we will do that. And if there's a consensus there, well, then we'll move forward. Can I make just 2 quick announcements? Everybody probably noticed all the cars today. That we have a lot of cars now because of pickleball. So but today it was not because of pickleball. It's actually because we're starting Stewart Canyon Phase 2, and so we just so happened to time it where we had the big walkthrough today. So that is again a crucial project in addressing some of the fire risk that is within the city, and we are gearing up to start phase 2. And so I just wanted to announce that. We'll be posting some information on our websites and some videos and things like that. So actually, that's all I have. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for being here, much appreciated. And let's adjourn.
Thank you.
Oops, sorry.